It's the 17th of August, 2016. Welcome to our Sound for Video session for this week. In this episode, or this session, excuse me, we are going to talk a little bit about hiding lavalier microphones. And we also have one question that we'll talk about in regards to loudness and Premiere Pro. So let's talk about lavalier microphones first. First of all, I am, again, I think most of you know that have either taken the course or who have watched my YouTube channel that I'm not a huge fan of lavalier microphones. Let me explain that a little bit first, because I think it has to do with it kind of informs where the best places are to hide lavalier microphones. So first of all, lavalier microphones, generally sound like lavalier microphones. And what I mean by that is that they sound like they're being worn on the person. So to me, that sounds a little distracting. It doesn't sound very natural. However, I recognize, because I've been doing this for a little while, that there are times when you have to use the lavalier microphone. There just really aren't a lot of other good options. So in addition to the fact that they sound like lavalier microphones, that is to say, they sound like they're on somebody's chest, or they're being worn on that person's body. They sound too close is, I think, the big thing. But all that aside, again, there are times when you need them, and there are ways you can, I think, hide them so that they sound a little bit better. And, because they're being worn on the body, oftentimes, for example, if they're wearing them down here on the chest or somewhere in this area, you're going to pick up some extraneous noise you didn't want to pick up necessarily sometimes, unless you're really careful. And even when you are really careful, you'll still pick some up. And that's just simply because as clothing rubs against itself, especially when people are wearing layers of clothing, the microphone is sensitive. It's going to pick that up. So there's some things you can do, and we'll talk about to help prevent some of that noise. But given that, I want to talk about some of my preferred ways to hide lavalier microphones, why those are beneficial, and some of the downsides that come along with those. So first and foremost, my number one way to hide a lavalier microphone, my preferred way in terms of the overall sound, is to actually hide them in people's hair, at their hairline. So let me illustrate a little bit here. So here's a lavalier microphone. We have, in this case, a Sanken COS 11D. And to be honest, my number one preferred way is to hide it in someone's hair, again, right up here near their hairline, hidden underneath their hair. Now, obviously, there's some downsides with that right off the bat. You cannot do that for people that don't have hair, or for people who don't have very much hair. Not an option. But for people that do have hair, especially a lot of women's hair, it works extraordinarily well in terms of how it sounds. And the reason for that are a few. Number one, it essentially becomes a miniature boom microphone. It's the optimal placement in terms of the frequency response of the microphone. So that's one of the biggest reasons. The number two reason is as they turn their head, the microphone follows them. So you don't have the issues where they drop out when they turn their head. So those are a couple of things that make that place of hiding lavalier microphones one of my favorites, and why I think it works so well. The downsides also are, of course, that again, you can't do it with people with little or no hair. Also, you need someone that knows how to do that, and doing that takes a little bit of work. There is in the course a tutorial where we actually show how it's done and compare it to mounting it on the chest. And kind of the basic idea, if you haven't seen that, is that we use these tension springs. These are just little tiny metallic springs. And we essentially have, again, it's best if you can have a hair person do this, but you actually put a part in their hair, place the microphone in the part, and then you use these tension springs to hold onto the hair on either side of the cable of the lavalier microphone to hold it in place. Comb all the hair back in place, and you're good to go. Another great thing about this is also that it doesn't pick up any clothing noise, really. If they're outside and the wind is blowing, yeah, it's going to pick that up. But if they're indoors or in a place where it's not terribly windy, That is my number one favorite place to hide lavalier microphones. It's also time consuming. So there are a fair number of downsides, and I recognize that, but that's just something to keep in your back pocket in terms of ideas. It is a great place to hide lavalier microphones. Number two choice for me is on eyeglasses if somebody is wearing glasses. So this one's going to be, again, an exclusive one that only works in a few circumstances. But if you can, it is one of the better places. So for glasses, if you can, I like to hide it right back here, behind here. There are a lot of downsides for this one too. But again, the upside is that this is a really good location in terms of frequency response and overall sound. And I've done that on a couple of occasions. It works very well. There's no clothing movement noise that it picks up, so that's good. It does take some time to get it hidden, and if the talent will be turning, usually you have to run the cable back on the arm of the glass and then behind to the back of their neck and then down their clothing. So if they turn to this side or the side where you have the microphone hidden, that cable may show. So that's another reason why you can't use it in certain circumstances. But again, if you can, it is one of the best sounding ways to do it too, second only to probably putting it up here in your hair. So those are probably my two favorite ways to hide lavalier microphones in terms of the way it sounds. So, of course, as I mentioned, it comes with a series of downsides. The next kind is, and I don't have one of these, but if you're going to be miking these types of the types of things where it's okay for the microphone to show, say, for example, exercise videos, lectures, things of that nature. One of my favorite ways to do that is actually a head or an ear-worn microphone where it actually connects to the ear and the microphone comes down onto the side of the cheek. Again, it can't be used in like narrative dramas and stuff like that generally, but for lectures and exercise videos, you get a lot of the same benefits of those two previous options that we talked about, hair and eyeglasses. But it's really quick and easy to set up. And most people don't mind wearing those if they're in those circumstances, doing exercise or doing lectures. The benefit with that is it's optimal placement for the best sound. It's good because it follows the person's face as they move, so you don't have the dropouts when they turn their head. It doesn't rustle and move against clothing, so it doesn't pick up all that noise. So again, very good option for recording those types of things. So the upside, best sound, easy to set up. That's actually way easier than hair or glasses. Downside is you really can't use it in cases where the microphone needs to be invisible. So something to keep in mind there. Countryman makes some really good ear-worn microphones, by the way. So that would be one of my first choices. They have a version of the Countryman B6 that is an ear-worn version, which is it just hooks on the ear, run it down to a body pack transmitter, and you're good to go. Number 4 is, and I'll leave notes for all of these down below, but number 4 is only for women. So if the talent is female, you can do this, and that is hiding it in the woman's bra. As strange as that sounds, it actually works pretty well, and I've done that several times. The way it works is that the optimal placement there is in between the two cups on the bra. There's usually a little strap or something that's connecting the two cups, and you hide it right behind that strap against their body, near their body. Usually there's a little space between their body and the mic then. It gets it in the right area. It's protected from clothing noise generally as the clothes move across the body as they move. And it works pretty well. The downside, of course, is that it's very awkward to try and mount that. So especially for people that aren't actors or actresses, that aren't used to any of that sort of production type of thing, wardrobe and costume and things of that nature. Typically what I do, again, I'm shooting mainly corporate videos. So for me, or documentaries. So for me, what I typically do if I'm going to do that technique is I will actually give the woman instructions, hand her the microphone, and have her go do that in private so that it's not as uncomfortable for her or for me. And usually that works pretty well. That one's not too complicated, and most women are able to get it mounted. And you're just using the alligator clip that comes with the lavalier microphone. So it's very straightforward. You just have to give them good instructions, and usually it works well. Then you have them come back out. And actually what I may do too is at that point, I may actually give them a little bit of tape to tape the cable. Um, that I still like to do myself because they don't necessarily always get it right, and you do need to do a few things. Usually once you mount the microphone, you wanna put a strain relief loop in the cable itself. You just loop it back over itself, and then you put a piece of tape here. Usually I'll use gaffer's tape for this. But that just kind of it gives the cable the ability, if this gets really tugged on, it gives it some play to actually, absorb some of that before it actually moves the microphone and picks up that sound. So actually, to be honest, I think cable noise is one of the biggest things that happen with lavalier microphones that make it difficult as well. So make sure you put that loop, and it just needs to be just down from the microphone head, not very far at all. And then I get pretty aggressive in terms of the amount of taping I do. So I like to leave just, enough, not a lot of slack, but just enough slack, and then put another piece of tape down here. And then I'll even do 3 or 4 pieces of tape along the body to keep it in place and keep it from moving around, so that the less movement of the cable you have, the less clothing noise you're going to pick up, and cable noise you're going to pick up as they move around. So in those cases, I almost always will use gaffer's tape for that. If you're not familiar with gaffer's tape versus duct tape, do not use duct tape. Don't go to your hardware store for this. This is where you actually need to go to a video supply store or a sound supply store. You can order it on Amazon, but make sure it's gaffer's tape and not duct tape. The adhesive is very different. The adhesive on gaffer's tape is much more clean, forgiving. So when you take the tape back off, it doesn't leave residue as long as you don't leave it on for more than 24 hours. So you definitely want gaffer's tape. You can use other types of tape as well. I often will use medical tape. This is good if you're applying it to someone's skin, because their skin is less likely to break out in some sort of rash or react to the adhesive on the tape. This is actually made for that purpose. And again, you can get that at almost any drugstore. Amazon has it as well. And then the other kind of tape that I keep, again, and I keep all this in a little kit here. I've just got a little tub here that I take whenever I go and do a job filled with this stuff. There's also another kind of tape called Topstick. And Topstick is actually also sometimes called Toupee tape or wig tape. It's a two-sided tape. And it also is made, of course, so that with an adhesive that is made for attaching to skin. So it does really well. And that's another one to keep in the kit. Now, one other thing to consider is that when you're using these tapes, especially on people's, if you were using it on their face, but typically I don't use these on the face. Sometimes it's helpful, and I don't have any with me right now, to have those little alcohol wipes. And what you can do with those is, before you put the tape on, use one of those alcohol wipes to kind of make sure there's not a lot of oil on their skin. That way the tape will stick better, and it's more likely to stay in place through the course of the shoot. All right. Where were we? Okay, we were talking about the women's bra. That's another place to hide. The fifth way I like to hide them is only possible in some circumstances, definitely not narrative drama, but sometimes it's just best to let the lavalier microphone show. Use the included alligator clip and clip it to their clothing on the outside. So there have been some corporate video shoots where we've defaulted to that position just because we spent, there was one in particular I remember, we spent probably 20 minutes fiddling around with one of the actors to get the microphone hidden in a place that wouldn't make a ton of noise. We were not going to be booming a boom mic, so we had to have the lavalier in that particular case. We spent, again, like I said, about 20 minutes, almost 30 minutes fiddling around trying to find a spot that was going to work, and nothing was working just because of the particular wardrobe that he had. So we ended up clipping it to his sport coat on the outside. And fortunately, because it was a dark sport coat, the microphone blended in pretty well, so it wasn't a big deal. His counterpart actress was, that was one where we actually hid it within her bra, and that worked great. So between those two things, we ended up making it work. But that is something to keep in mind. If you've got to make a quick decision, the director is getting antsy and needs to move forward, If they're okay with hiding, with not hiding the microphone, instead wearing it on the outside, that can be an option. It's not great, but that is another thing to keep in mind. If all of those are not an option, then I default to hiding it on the upper body. Again, not my favorite place because I don't like the way it sounds generally, but here are a few things to consider if you do have to hide it down here. Number one, in the Hobbit movies, Martin Freeman played Bilbo Baggins. He was one of the main characters. And where they hid the microphones on him is he was wearing sort of a tunic that had these lapels on them. And what they actually did is they took Countryman B6 lavalier microphones, which is a tiny, tiny little microphone, lavalier microphone, and they hid one of them on each of his lapels. And those were kind of the lapels that kind of stand up a little bit. And they hid one on each one so that when he turned his head, they had a good recording from one mic or the other. So they didn't have the issues with the dropouts. And it was also away from his body a little bit, which also helped the frequency response and the overall sound. So that was a really clever way of doing that. And also clever from the standpoint that when he turned his head, which of course in the drama people are going to do, and they were able to pick up both sides regardless of where he was facing. So there is number 6. And it looks like I did not number my items correctly. Number 7 is kind of a very traditional way of hiding lavalier microphones, and that is under the placket of someone's button-down shirt. Again, not always an option if they don't have this, but this is the placket right here of a button-down shirt. And usually, this is where I'm going to talk about some of the things you'll want to use here, some of the expendables you'll need. Here in the United States, there's this product here called Moleskin. This is actually used for covering up blisters on your feet if you're in that situation to, if you're going to be hiking or something like that, and you've got blisters on your feet, you use this to cover them up. It's adhesive on one side, and it's sort of a, what's the best way to describe this? It's sort of a soft felt on the other. So you can see adhesive back here, soft felt on this side. And what I do with these are probably the most common implement for hiding lavalier microphones, or one of the most common, pieces of material that you'll need. And what I try to do is I try to pre-cut some of these. If you don't pre-cut them, you're going to need to have scissors available to you. Don't rely on someone else in the crew to have scissors. It's your job. So bring scissors. If you or a Leatherman's tool that has, scissors included in them. But what I'll do is I'll cut these into small pieces, and we're going to create a little sandwich with these, with a microphone in the middle. So I create cut a few pieces like that for each talent, for each person that you're going to mic up. And where did the mic head go? Here it is. So the idea here is that you essentially create a little sandwich with, here's the mic right there. So you'll take the adhesive off and sandwich the microphone between those two pieces of adhesive, with the head just barely coming out the top like that. Sandwich it in there. This has adhesive that is made for attaching to skin, and it doesn't generally leave a residue on your microphone as well, which is part of the reason they use it. But it also has this soft exterior, which is less likely to create noise as clothing rubs across it. So that's why Moleskin is so often used in hiding lavalier microphones. So you sandwich it in between like that, and then typically what I will do is I'll pull out that Topstick tape. Again, this is the 2-sided tape used for wigs and toupees. And then I'll use a piece of that on the back of this to sandwich it in underneath the placket. So it's facing out like this. See, the tip of the microphone is just barely facing out there, and you hide it just behind the placket. I usually go down a little bit more. We just don't have a lot of space here on this video camera, but maybe down below the second button, and hide it there. If they're just wearing a button-down shirt like this. And actually, to be honest, the same thing if they're wearing a t-shirt, except I go underneath the t-shirt. Exact same technique. Some other options that are similar. We have another one called a Hush Lav, This is sort of like makeup foam. It's very soft foam. It's a little cylinder, and you can see the cylinder has a little hole in it right there. You just put the microphone in that hole, insert it through the hole with the tip of the microphone just barely sticking out, and then you can just tape that. So that one's this one's nice. It's a little, to be honest, I prefer this method. It doesn't fit all lavalier microphones. It's really sort of optimized for the Sanken, the COS 11D. But there are a lot of lavalier microphones that will fit in there as well. And this can stretch some, so that's okay. But that's definitely worth a try. And that's sold at B&H Photo and any of the audio houses. Excuse me. All right. Another option is what are called Rycote Undercovers. Rycote Undercovers include 2 pieces. And these are nice because they're quick and easy. They have, first of all, a double-sided adhesive piece. What you do is you stick this on the clothing first. So I would stick this on the button placket, and you just peel off the one side. And then you peel off the other side. You attach the lavalier microphone to that. And then there's just a little felt piece that comes with it that you attach over the lavalier microphone. And this is a soft felt. And the idea here is that as the clothes rub across this, it's going to reduce some of that noise that you'd pick up. The undercovers work as well. These are not my favorite. They work okay, but I've used them. I've used the Hush Lav, and I've used the Moleskin methods. My favorite is probably the Hush Lav. It's quick and it works well relative to the others, I think. But I think everyone's got their own preference. So just take what I say on that particular matter with a grain of salt. Everyone has their own favorite way, and you'll probably want to experiment with each of these. And that's another thing. Before you get in a situation where you are the sound guy on a crew, I highly recommend you try these. Check your technique, lav up your friends and family, and actually record them and see what happens. Get some experience. You've just got to go try this before you get good at it. And in fact, I probably don't do it quite enough. Another thing that can be helpful when you're hiding underneath clothing is fur. You could just go to a fabric store and purchase some of this. You can buy some of this online. Bumblebee Industries has one, but it's pretty expensive. It's like $40 for a little piece. It's actually bigger than this, but what you do is you put this, once you've done all this other stuff with the lavalier in terms of getting it in the right place, then on the other side of the clothing, you put this so that if the clothing does rub against it, it's rubbing against this fur, and it doesn't create as much noise. I haven't found that to work all that great, but it is an option there. All right, other options here. So we talked about the button placket. We talked about T-shirts. You can also come underneath someone's collar. This is the one that I'd least like the sound of. It sounds throaty and right on their body. I don't like the sound of that. I would keep that as an option, but I would keep it at the bottom of the list. So if you follow the YouTube channel, I did a recent review of the Juice Link Little Darling, which is a kind of it looks like a body pack transmitter, a wireless transmitter, but it's not. It's a recorder instead. I actually wore the Sanken underneath my collar for that, and you can hear it doesn't sounds okay. Your ears get used to it pretty quickly, but if you compare it side by side with a boom mic or with a lavalier mic that's placed up on the head, it doesn't sound nearly as good. So again, not my first choice. Another choice, again, that's not always the best, but can be okay. If the talent is wearing a necktie, what you can do is you can hide the lavalier in the knot, so it actually sticks down out of the bottom of the knot. Again, keep in mind that most lavalier microphones are omnidirectional in terms of their pickup, so which direction it's pointing is not important, but you can stick it out the bottom of the knot, and that can work okay. Another one I've seen is putting a pen in the shirt pocket and hiding the lavalier microphone in the pen. That, of course, relies on, it's usually going to be men that have shirt pockets. I don't really like that technique. It takes a lot of time to set it up, and it actually sounds pretty decent, but it does take a lot of prep time. And you have to cut a hole in their shirt behind the pocket to route the cable out of the little pen underneath to the body pack transmitter. So not a great. I mean, it just takes a lot of setup, and you have to have a shirt that people are willing to sacrifice a little bit. So those are some ideas in terms of hiding lavalier microphones. Now, one other thing I want to show you here is a product called Neopax. Let me just show you here. Neopax is essentially a neoprene belt that you can use to mount on somebody's body in various places to hide the body pack transmitter, because you've got to hide this thing too. And you can see here they have some that attach to legs. This is a very good one to use for weddings if you're doing wedding videography, because it's much easier to hide on a bride if you can stick it on her leg, because that is one part of her body that will most likely be covered. They also have waistbands. They have a whole bunch of different, they have those that you can attach to people's ankle. So if that part of their body is going to be out of the frame, that's another place. Here's the waist belt. So these are really kind of a cool thing as well. And these are available. I think you generally have to go to the audio houses to get these. So for example, True Audio is where I do most of my shopping. We don't have one of these in town, but there's one in Los Angeles, which is relatively close to me. And I believe these guys have Neopax. Yeah, here they've got them right here. So $30 for the transmitter belt, for example, just so you're aware. Again, all of these things can really be bought at these audio houses. You don't have to go there, but there's an option for you. All right. We did have one other question. So there's our discussion on lavalier microphone hiding. I hope that was helpful for you. We did have one question from our friend Gary Davies. I just want to address that really quickly here. Let me pull that up. Here we go. Okay, Gary asked, Curtis, what have you found to be the most effective or efficient method in Premiere Pro CC to bring all the dialogue tracks to the recommended -12 dB, or is there a loudness factor to be considered? Yes, Gary, that's a great question. There is Premiere Pro CC. So this is not going to apply to older versions, but if you have, I believe it was in late 2014 or late 2015. I think it was late 2015, actually. In the version that they released in late 2015, they added loudness normalization to the export. So when you go to export your film, you can just set a loudness target, and as it exports your film, your video, it will actually modify the loudness of the audio so that it meets that specification, whatever your specification is. I would generally aim for, it doesn't measure it in dB, it measures it in LUFS, which is loudness units full scale. And in fact, we are getting ready. I'm probably days away. I know I've been saying this for a while and I apologize, but I'm probably just a few days away from launching my new post-processing course. And in the post-processing course, we talk about loudness. Loudness units full scale is what you're targeting. And if you're posting your video to the web, usually you're going to post -16 LUFS. All you do is in the export, and we're actually going to show that. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel. I'll put a link to that in the show notes below. We don't have time to go through all of that, but it shows you how you can set that loudness target, do the export, and then your audio is taken care of. Now, what that doesn't take care of is if your dialogue audio is especially dynamic, you're going to need to take care of that first. You're going to need to do some compression to take care of that first. Otherwise, it will just literally limit the tops of those waveforms off, and that may not sound great. So it is built into Premiere Pro CC. It is an option in the export window when you go to export your sequence, and that makes it very easy. That's the good thing and the bad thing. So the good thing about that is that it's very easy. It's just a setting you set on export and you're done. The bad thing about it is you don't have a lot of control. If you don't know whether your dialogue is too dynamic, you don't know whether you need to compress up front, because it doesn't give you a lot of visibility. It just does it. And what that means in practical terms, again, is if it runs into a situation where it needs to, one of the peaks on the waveform is just a little too hot, it just limits that right off. It just chops it off so it is flat. So if I'm doing a piece that I really care about, that I need it to sound really good, I'm going to do most of this in Adobe Audition, and where I can actually see the waveform, I can actually target exactly where I need things to be and take it from there. So I'll put a link to that down below in the show notes so that you have that. All right, so there's lavalier microphones. There is loudness in Premiere Pro CC. Thank you for the question, Gary. Appreciate that. And also, I hope that was helpful for you in terms of hiding lavalier microphones. If you have any other questions, please leave those down below. One other note, couple notes. Number one, the audio post-processing course will be out in the next few days. I think most of you are already signed up at the school, so you'll be notified via email when that becomes available. And because you're signed up with the school, we'll probably have a little discount there for when we first launch it. And then secondly, it turns out that Google Hangouts on Air, they're shutting that down. So that's what we're using right here. We'll be moving to YouTube Live, which is very similar. It'll be a little different, though, in terms of where you go. You'll go to YouTube to watch the sessions instead of coming to Google+. So I'll leave instructions for that in the upcoming emails that I send out for the Sound for Video sessions. I hope that was helpful for you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you again soon.